Recently, Bill Gates, founder of Microsoft or whatever, he had a bit of a blog post or something where he talked about how robots should be taxed like a human is, and also because robots in some places are taking the jobs of humans. It's how things are going. Well, he wanted taxing robots was supposed to deal with three different things. One, it was going to slow the growth of robots in the workforce. It was supposed to slow the loss of human jobs. They were going to continue to do that job as a human for longer. And the taxing of the robots was supposed to provide money to fund senior care jobs and those jobs would be filled by people that might be displaced by the robots taking that. And that was Bill Gates' point, is that he focused on the senior care, and that's fair. I posted this on Facebook and I said I respect Bill Gates a lot, but I disagree. And some people commented, and they had some good points, but I want to lay this out here. I got home, I took thinking in the shower. I'm like, here's a few reasons why I think we should not be taxing robots that take people's jobs, and I typed a few things up here. So first of all, we want to encourage innovation instead of stifle it. We don't want to slow things down. We want to help us advance as a civilization. I don't know who would disagree with me on that. And the Industrial Revolution is a perfect example of this. Henry Ford. People know the story. There were cars before Henry Ford, but he found a way to make a product which was reliable. He managed to get it out to people at a decent price, and the way he did that was by paying his workers higher than normal. He paid them better because he wanted the very best workers. They actually worked less. They were down to 40 hours a week, which was insane at that time. But it brought the best in, and it allowed them to be on their top game when they were there. Everybody knows if you increase in overtime, someone working 50, 60 hours a week, those last 10, 20 hours of the work week are lower productivity, even though you're paying them more. So getting it down to 40 hours a week with high quality work at that time, that makes sense. And of course he paid for it, and he competed. People competed to come work for him. That's good. I don't know why that would be bad. Another big aspect of what Ford did was that he automated the process. Now, he at the time he didn't think of it as automation, but coming up with the assembly line, making things more efficient, and moving. The big difference was that he moved the car through the assembly line as opposed to the groups of people moving through. Very simple, but it was enough. It was a mind shift, so that Ford was able to make these cars cheaper, higher quality, and pump out a lot more with good quality workers, paid them well, and they were efficient because they worked less, actually. So not only did we make a good product, but this product that he got out there was inexpensive, and it was available to people. This new technology was available to people who would not have normally had it. They hadn't even considered it. They were using a horse and mule, or mules and donkeys and horses and whatever. Draft animals. Now they're using a vehicle, and so that was a huge increase in productivity. And of course, the government didn't tax on the BTUs burned by an ox, but now. Because that was staying there, but the government could tax on that car being sold. The government taxed on the fuel that was spent on that. And I'm not saying tax is necessarily good, but now the government is getting a slice of that productivity. Also, we moved from bartering, like I said, people just having eggs or even just giving them to each other, moving from that system to grocery stores, for example. We're going from bartering to currency, and of course you can tax currency, you can't tax bartering. So we want to focus more towards increased quality and efficiency. So building things being more robotic, advancing technology, are actually going to make better and less expensive products. Okay, food, for example. If we can get more food to my family for a cheaper price, well, that increases my budget, or I can buy more food with the same amount of money, for example. Same thing with vehicles. If I can now buy a vehicle that'll last me 20 years instead of 10 years, well, if I'm a wise person, I will keep that vehicle for much longer. The value there is going to maintain, and even just as simple as getting more fuel, more miles per gallon, that type of thing. And we talk about automating cars. This can actually, robotic cars, self-driving cars. If I don't have to focus on driving for my hour drive, my hour commute, and I can work on something else, I can be more productive. I can even, spend half of that time on a Skype call with my family or whatever you'd like, whatever it is. And I think that that's value added right there. So I wouldn't want to just throw out self-driving cars and say that's a bad thing. Also, when we think about self-driving cars, we now can go from a point where we have maybe 2 or 3 vehicles in a family back to one. So if I take my self-driving car to 20 minutes across town to my job, well, my self-driving car can now drive back home and pick up my children and take them to school, or my wife can take that vehicle, go to her work, and then the self-driving car can actually go to school, pick up my daughter, what have you. This is down the road, but these are things that we just assume that self-driving cars are somehow so evil, but it's allowing us to be more efficient, and really it's going to decrease how much we're going to have to spend for that car. It doesn't mean it's good. It's better overall, I feel. Bill Gates was concerned with the jobs leaving because of robots. Well, here are just a few opportunities for people to increase in jobs, and I can be criticized for this. I'm not an expert on this, but these are things we kind of tend to forget about. Senior care. We know that going forward, baby boomers retiring and eventually dying, and as that market is growing, and so senior care is an area that's of growth. Nurses, for example, I mean, we know this. It's really, really tough to get the human touch from a robot. So it's tough. It's really hard to envision a world in which robots are taking care of our seniors. That's not really very likely. And of course, that's a growing market. Also, robot technicians, obviously. If you have more robots, you will have more people to take care of those. Not only to build them, although you could argue that the robot builds another robot. But we have to design and maintain and service these and program these robots. And so, yes, of course, a company would not go with a robot if it actually costs more to maintain it than it would be to just have those same people do the job. Understood. But that will be a growing market. Okay. So think of it this another aspect. Think of it right now. Indonesia, for example, they have a lot of our manufacturing jobs, clothes, because it is cheaper for them to do it by hand than it is for us to do it, to be automated. So as we move forward and we get better at our robotics or whatever it is, we can make clothes cheaper, which of course is better for me buying them for my children, but also as if we're the leading edge on this robotics journey, we're going to have better robot technicians, for example, and just like we remote into work sometimes, why would a robot technician or robot programmer who lives in the U.S. not remote in to Indonesia and service that robot? Because if we have the technology or the skill set here, where they're years behind, and not picking on Indonesia, but this is one thing we don't really think about as we move forward. Jobs will not be as location based anymore. They will be skill based, and it's going to allow us to compete better. It's going to encourage us to compete better, and competition is good. I don't know. No one will argue that. I hope not. So that's something to think about. Another thing is that we assume that we want humans to keep making more and more money and then buying more and more things, and okay, each year I get an extra $5,000 and I want to buy a bigger house and whatever. Well, part of that actually adds to inflation. There's a lot of things that go into inflation, but that's the kind of inflation I'm not necessarily that thrilled with, because we're actually getting less for our dollar than we were before. So what if in a horrible set of circumstances, right? There's a husband and wife, and they work at this assembly line. They're making $25 an hour. Well, if one of those jobs goes away, and say the wife has the education and she's able to go back to school for 2 more years, or whatever and be a robot technician. Well, she's working, but instead of making $25 an hour, she's probably making 35, $40 an hour, whatever it is. And the husband maybe was just good with his hands, and that's how he got the job. Well, first of all, he may choose to stay home, and that's okay. We need to consider that. We can't just assume that working more is better. So that person staying home, for one, you're more efficient. You're spending less money if only one person is working. It's simple. But staying home is going to help in a lot of ways. Where was I going with this? So, especially if we're focusing on not focusing on making more money, but we're just focusing on being good at what we're doing, we're going to, instead of making more dollars each year, we get to focus in on working less hours. Now, someone's not going to want to hear that, okay? I get that. But if I go from working 50 hours a week and because I want to make more money and my hours get cut back to 40, well, yeah, I make less money. But I'm also more productive in the time I'm there. I have more time at home. That's obviously a good thing. And you're going to be paying less taxes per total hour work. This is simple. Anyone who's worked a lot of overtime, you know, like, man, I didn't get any of that money back. And of course, you're spending more time with the family. I'll talk more about that in a moment. Let's think about Russia. Let's compare the United States. Let's say we have a free open market, and we want to encourage innovation and what have you, and they're not going to stifle the use of robots in our manufacturing and whatnot. Let's think about Russia for a minute. Let's say, for example, Russia focuses on giving each of their workers, their human workers, a job instead of allowing a robot to replace that job. Okay, let's say that's what they're focusing on. You can say it's socialist or whatever, communist, something. Let's say America is not going to they're going to say we're going to allow innovation, we're going to encourage it, and we're not going to stifle it. When it's not a race to the bottom, it's a race to the top. Well, eventually there will be countries, whether it's America or not, that will take advantage of innovation. So we don't want to be that Russia. We want to win, right? So one thing that's going to happen is that if we focus on robots, but we allow it to happen, right? For one, we're going to increase our education. You will need to have the right education to survive. That's how it will be. I understand. Manual labor jobs are going away. Whether it's in 20 years or 200 years, they're going away. So I would rather stay ahead of the curve on that. So let's focus on a better education. Well, to get a better education, yeah, we can tax the crap out of people and we can dump that money into public schools. I think we kind of get an idea just how efficient that is when we let the government decide how the money should be spent. But we'll give them the benefit of the doubt. But even if someone stays in a public school and the school doesn't change, one parent staying at home, this is proven, one parent staying at home, mother, father, whatever, staying home is going to help that education advance with the children, for example. Okay, obviously two parents homes are better. Also, one parent staying home is going to lower expenses. We know that. One car instead of two or three, for example. And of course, one parent staying home, you're going to have better, well-rounded children. There's no question. That's the way humans are. And I'm not mandating that there needs to be someone at home all the time, but I don't know who's going to argue with me whether that children are better or worse with one parent at home. So while we're on that topic, let's think about being a more fiscally responsible society. Spend less money on stuff, for example. Okay, and once we spend a little bit less money on stuff, we have a little bit more to spend to become debt free. Wow, what a novel idea! And then once we're debt free, we can earn interest instead of paying it. That makes sense, right? If we're not focusing 50, 60 hours a week at work and we're working 40 hours a week or maybe even 35 hours a week, say you're a salaried person, and instead of trying to get that raise, you just try to become more efficient and say, I'm going to get the same amount of work done, but I can do it in 35 hours. Well, that extra 5 hours you can spend with your family while still getting better at what you're doing. We don't want to slow the growth, the intellectual growth, But if we can get more done with the same amount of time, we can reinvest that time in something else. Okay, so invest time into your own education and into your children's. Why not? I mean, that makes sense. That's bettering us overall without just saying, well, I made 100 grand this year, oh, 120 next year. That it shouldn't necessarily be the goal. We want to get better. We don't necessarily need to make more money. We just want to get better. That's my choice, I guess, or I'd like to be able to make that conscious choice and have that happen. And of course, this really just boils down to, this whole thing comes down to taking responsibility for ourselves and our own choices. It's a difficult thing for Americans to do. I get that. I'm an American. I like spending money. I like newer stuff. I'd love to have a brand new vehicle. And we kind of get wrapped up into that. It's easy to go get a loan instead of just save up, keep a vehicle an extra 5 years and pay for it in cash. People don't do that, but we know that we probably should. So taking responsibility for ourselves and making our own wise choices instead of letting the government basically tax away our competition so that we can just keep doing the same job and be comfortable in that job, not trying to get any better, but just sitting back and say, well, my job's sit here for me. That's why I feel that taxing robots, which they inevitably will, which take humans' jobs, I don't think that's the solution.